Welcome to Doctors of the Baobab. On this podcast, we go beyond the white coat to get to know the doctors that we admire and respect. So join us as we listen to these stories and get to know the people behind the stethoscope. And in today's show, I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Blessings Kasenge, who's a shining example of resilience, of determination, and visionary leadership. He's a dedicated medical doctor with degrees in human biology, as well as a medical degree from the University of Zambia, with a huge passion for health equity, leadership, public speaking, and particularly youth development, which is certainly unparalleled. As a member of the third SADC Youth Parliament, Dr. Blessings champions the potential of young people across Africa, empowering them to become leaders in their own right. He has a commitment to mental health awareness, which earned him a Global Changemakers grant, and his exceptional public speaking skills have also led him to win national accolades, including Best Speaker in debates on antimicrobial resistance. Dr. Blessings Kasenge's passion, leadership, and dedication are inspiring a new generation of change makers across Africa. Dr. Blessings Kasenge, welcome to Doctors of the Baobab.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Nandomiso. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here. And of course, excited for what we're going to share as well. I believe people are going to learn a lot, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Definitely, definitely. I know they will learn a lot because this is not the first time you and I have
Yes.
talked. And the last conversation and the last event that we convened together was really inspirational for me
Yeah.
because my eyes were really opened around the issues of working in multi-generational teams. So I'm not shy to mention that I'm a Gen X, and of course, there's so much learning from the next generation of leaders.
Yeah.
But before we get into the work that you're doing around youth and youth leadership in the medical fraternity and outside, I'd like to get to know a little bit about you. Where did you first notice your leadership skills as a young person, or have they always been there? So just tell us a little bit about where you were born and your progression into leadership.
All right. Thank you so much for that question, Dr. Nandomiso. And I think it's really exciting. And I think when that question came up, I'm actually trying to think where I actually started from. But I would love really to just go back to my birth and just everything that happened during that time. Well, I was born here in Zambia in a city called Kitwe. It's actually on the Copper Belt. And I was actually born coming from a humble background, a Christian home as well. So the time I was actually born, my parents told me that I think they had lost two other children before I was born. So it means when I was born, I was actually the firstborn. Yeah, and I think for me that is where leadership begins from, because when you're in a home setting and you're the firstborn, and then siblings start coming, then and realize that actually I'm a leader already, because I've got no option in this particular case but to just be able to offer guidance and to just be able to lead my siblings as well. So that's where leadership really began from for me. And then growing up as well, I just had that passion as well to lead. I do remember holding a number of class positions. I was class captain, and I always like to say that I was class captain. I remember vividly from about seventh grade to about 12th. So that's about 16 consecutive terms. So it means that my friends kept electing me every other term. And yeah, it was considered, I think when I look back, that was more of like dictatorship, because how would you like permanently be class captain for that long, right? So, but when I look back again, I realize that leadership really is about ensuring that people actually, one, feel comfortable in you leading them. And then also people just have the trust that you're going to be able to deliver to their expectations. It's about also yourself, giving yourself selflessly, because obviously challenging times will always be there, and they've always been there in the journey. But I think from that time, I did realize that this was actually me being ushered into leadership. And so during that period, I learned a lot during my primary school days, secondary school days when I was class captain. until I was actually elected as or chosen as well as a prefect in my 12th grade as well. So all those experiences really I felt for me were a foundation, and I learned a lot of people skills. I learned a lot about how to handle differences. I learned a lot also about just how to be that visionary leader. And then also coming into university, I also did hold a number of various positions. But this time, of course, I wanted to, first of all, like discover something of my own, just build something of my own, because now I was having passion really to help young people just build their confidence. I always believe that we can only achieve our true potential when we help someone else achieve theirs. Ultimately, if we don't help anyone discover their potential, it will also be very difficult for us to live up to our full potential. And so, with that in mind, I actually founded a debate society in medical school, which we call the Ridgeway Debate and Speech Society. And this was basically meant to build young people's leadership skills, but ultimately as well build their public speaking skills, because I also believe that all great leaders are great public speakers, and public speaking is also a tool that we can actually use to build confidence in our leaders. We want leaders that will be showing up, leaders that will be able to articulate and be able to speak issues as they are, because that is the only way that they can inspire a nation, inspire generations as well. So that is basically how I began. And then from there, of course, I had a few hurdles. I did remember standing for elections in medical school in my 4th year, and I lost those particular elections. So again, when I look back, it was a very difficult moment where you almost feel like giving up. But then again, it's also important to realize that not all is going to be rosy, and leadership itself is not a bed of roses. There will definitely be challenges that will keep arising along the way, but it's up to us to still keep up the fight. So after I lost that particular election, I tried again, and eventually I was elected to Students' Union of my university, where I got to represent students as Minister of Justice, and also sitting on the University Disciplinary Committee, just helping people and helping students as well, ensuring that they're receiving the justice that they actually deserve. And so, roughly, I think in university, this was my journey. But of course, I continued even after graduation. And I think we'll be able to talk a bit more as well about the Leadership Academy for doctors that we have, where we're also just trying to build doctors and just being able to build confident leaders. So, in a nutshell, Dr. Ndumiso, I think that's how my journey has been so far.
Yeah, fascinating, fascinating. And it sounds like you are collecting many lessons also along the way,
Yeah,
documenting all
yeah,
those lessons. But going back to your childhood again, and I think you laid it out very well, the leadership roles that you took on. I'm wondering where medicine inserted itself as a possibility for you
yeah.
to pursue as a career.
Yeah, so firstly, when I was born, because of the experience that my parents had of having lost two children already before I was actually born, I think one was a miscarriage and another one was born, and I think they died probably a day or two after. And so when I was born, I had this cough. My chest used to get congested. So at that point, I think my parents thought I actually had bronchitis. But then I also had a challenge with my eyes. So I would always visit hospitals to get my eyes checked. They would just get swollen, and then, of course, I would become very teary. Yeah, so I didn't understand by that time what the diagnosis was, but I remember that I was always in and out of hospital because of those various ailments. And while I was in these hospital environments, I got a liking of the environment, and I also got to admire the job that they're actually doing, the doctors, and just in terms of taking care of people. And I think that's where my passion really stemmed from. But also, I also began asking myself questions as to why I was spending so much time in the hospital. Sometimes we'd go as early as 6 hours in the morning, but we'd be leaving probably in the afternoon. And then I realized there was also a very big shortage as well in terms of healthcare professionals. And I got to know this more even as I grew up, that there's actually a very big gap that I can actually feel in this particular area. And so for me, that was really the birth of my passion to actually study medicine. And I think growing up, it was always known that Blessing wanted to become a medical doctor. And of course, I was pursuing that very, very diligently, ensuring that I was paying particular attention to my studies and putting in the best that I could at that particular time. But of course, there were quite a number of hurdles along the way. And I think the biggest hurdle for me came in my first year of university, when I was actually told that they only wanted about 80 people to study medicine. And that is against, I think, about 2,000 of us that were enrolled. So it meant that we had to compete for the very few slots that were available. And it was a very big challenge because you've got others who are definitely brighter than I was, others as well who are coming from different backgrounds, the same aspirations, same goals as you are, and you have to compete with them and then also be able to just ensure that you make that particular list of eight that you actually wanted. But then, of course, with hard work and of course the grace of God, I was able to make it in that particular number, and from there my journey began. A 7-year journey to actually achieving and getting my degree, which of course was first a degree in human biology, then a degree in medicine as well. So that is in a nutshell how my journey has been and where my passion actually stemmed from.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like, as you've laid it out, a long journey, challenges
Yeah,
along the way. And I know
yeah,
you are what we would call early to mid-career. And so I'm not sure
yeah,
if this is an unfair question or not, but
yeah,
perhaps you might have the advantage of time on your side. If I ask you,
yeah.
if you had the opportunity again to, which direction would you go? Would you still choose medicine or would you consider something else?
Actually, I would still choose medicine because as I was growing up and as I was doing medicine, one thing that I realized, and I think that is one thing that I would really want even young people to actually take away from this, is that I realized that while I was a doctor, I could actually become more than a doctor. And I think because I realized very early on that I could become more than a doctor, I appreciated the fact that I did medicine, because then it gave me a platform to build on, a platform to dream, a platform to actually go in any particular direction. And then, of course, the respect that comes with being a doctor in society means that you ultimately get to find yourself in various positions, even at a family level, when they need someone to actually make a decision or when they need input from someone, you'll be that person that you can actually go to and say, okay, because he's a doctor, I think he's got good judgment and is going to be able to give us a very good advice on this particular topic. And then, of course, in other different areas that you get to explore, you realize that there's so many areas, because for a long time, doctors were not very common, or doctors were rare back then. You find that there's so many territories that are actually unexplored. I attend conferences these days, leadership conferences, where you realize you're the only doctor in that particular environment. So it really goes to show that for me, being a doctor doesn't mean that your life must end there, but should really be a platform, really be like a catapult moment for you to actually launch out and then be able to achieve all those other things that we actually wanted to achieve. I challenge myself to say, why can't we have a doctor become a president of a country one day? Why can't we have a doctor even dream as big as owning a hospital, dream as big as leading nations, leading continents? I think this is the level that we must really aim at, because as doctors, I believe that with the training that we have actually incurred, one thing that it brings out of us is resilience. It brings out the aspect of patience, brings out the aspect of working under pressure. And all these, I feel, when combined, really has the potential to make us very great leaders. And therefore, we must not limit ourselves to what we can do. We must always aim to be the best and do the best.
And you really laid it out well in terms of some of the qualities that have served you well in your
Yeah.
journey, resilience, diligence, and so forth. What kind of mindset would you advise doctors in general, but perhaps from your own perspective, early career doctors, with regards to how they can be successful? If you were to give them advice, what is the mindset that you think they should adopt that has worked for you?
Yeah. So I think the mindset they should adopt really is they should not have a tunnel vision. They should be broad in their thinking, because as the world is evolving, it means that there are also, first of all, one, there are a number of opportunities coming up, and then also as well, everything else is evolving. So it's no longer as it was. I'll give you an example of my country, Zambia. I think a few years back, there were very few doctors in the country. So what normally used to happen was you write your final year exams on a Friday. By Monday, you are in a job. The end of the month, in that same month, you're getting a salary, you're getting a settling allowance. Next thing, you're driving a car, and life has begun. But now, coming to the current situation, we have over 1,000 or so unemployed doctors within our country. And not only Zambia, even South Africa, they're also battling with an issue of unemployment. I've also been seeing that Kenya as well has been battling with that issue of unemployment. And so we've seen that there's now a lot of doctors now being trained in countries. So that itself entails that the thinking that was there previously cannot be used to solve this same kind of problem that we actually face today. And I always like to say that the 21st century problems, for example, cannot be solved with 21st century problems, for example, that were being solved in the 20th century with solutions in the 20th century cannot be solved today with the same kind of thinking. It means that we must be able to evolve to solve these present day challenges. If these challenges we're facing today, they're new, right? And so it means that they require innovation. They require us to have a broader understanding of the entire perspective. So for young doctors coming up and young students as well, it's very important to think broadly. Don't have a tunnel vision. Don't only think medicine, I should say. It means that you must think broadly and don't be afraid to launch out. Don't be afraid to also begin from where you have. We've got various tools which can be used now. We've got the aspect of social media, which we can use now. So it's no longer even about, I don't have the money, but it's just about what can I start with what I have. I believe you've got a smartphone. Almost everyone these days now, young people have got smartphones. You've got airtime to buy data bundles. How can you then use that smartphone and those bundles to be able to create impact? It's very easy. You could begin some form of podcast. You could begin sharing articles. And the more you do this, the more you actually gain visibility. And the visibility then opens you up to a variety of opportunities. I found myself in situations where I'm even asking, and rather situations where people ask me to say, are you really a doctor? Because some environments are those where they don't expect to have a doctor in that particular environment. Why should you talk about leadership? You're supposed to be in the hospital. So I get to get that a lot because most of us as doctors, we think narrow. We think that I finished school, I need to go and work in a hospital, but it does not have to be like that for everyone. What should really happen for us is how then can we use what we have learned in medical school to launch out and be able to explore other areas, be able to explore other opportunities that can actually present themselves to us because now things have changed and therefore we must also be able to evolve and be able to launch out in a different way.
Yes, certainly that linear career path, the
Yeah.
traditional path, is not always an option. And so,
Yeah.
as you say, it's important, especially for early career doctors, to be flexible and open-minded about the possibilities, and there are possibilities.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that
Yeah.
you're leaving medicine. It just means that you're applying, as you
Yeah.
said, your expertise and the skills in a different context. What keeps you up at night? What troubles you at night?
That's a very interesting question. Yeah, so I would say something that keeps me up at night and makes me wake up in the morning every day is first of all, I'm very ambitious, and I normally have a saying that if something must kill a man, it must be ambition. I believe that if you are to die, then you must die an ambitious person. And even as you are dying, people must be able to say that blessings really did try to change the world. So, what keeps me up at night, really, for me, is I really want to change the world. And apart from changing the world, I want to just help, as I said earlier, help young people discover their potential. I think it's really what gives me fulfillment to see many young people, for example, that did not have certain opportunities, get them, that did not know certain things to be able to get them, that did not have certain skills to be able to build them. And so I spend a lot of time interacting with other young people to see how best within us we can find solutions to the varying challenges that we actually face not only at the national level, but even at the continental level. So I'm currently sitting on the Youth Parliament, the Southern Africa Youth Parliament, and it's also one of those positions that I really aimed for. And I told myself to say, you know what, how can I then broaden my impact to also cater for a more large group, and in this case, at a regional level. And so having joined the Youth Parliament, for me, my goal really is to ensure that I make a very big difference in this world to ensure that I really help people achieve what they really want to achieve, to really just be able to direct them, also sharing my experiences and also just teaching them some of the nitty gritties of how my path has been and how I've actually journeyed up to now because I know that there's a lot of opportunities out there, but it's also just about how can we help ourselves get those particular opportunities because sometimes we may not really see the opportunities. It may take someone to come and show us those opportunities. Sometimes it's not really that they're not there, but just requires us, for example, to develop certain skills that will really then help us launch out and approach those particular opportunities.
And so in those types of spaces like Parliament, for sure you are interacting with different generations. And
Yeah.
that is sometimes potentially a source of conflict or friction or misunderstanding. And I'm wondering how you see, and we have talked about this, but I think you had some amazing insights about multi-generational teams. How could we ensure that in those settings where young doctors are working with or across different generations, that they also benefit? How would you advise people to navigate those spaces?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's very important for us as young people to understand that in as much as we want to change the world, we cannot change the world alone. Because changing the world itself is going to require experience, it's going to require insight. So therefore, it's impossible for us to change the world alone. That's why it's very important to collaborate. So they say collaboration is a new innovation. So it means that we must be able to collaborate amongst ourselves. We must also be able to collaborate with others. That's the other generation, being the Gen X, as you've said, and other generations as well that have been there before us, because they've also had their fair share of experiences and they've also made their fair share of mistakes. And sometimes the best way to actually do something right is to learn from a mistake. So to learn from someone who made a mistake so that you don't repeat the same mistake. Because if we are going to be repeating mistakes that were made, for example, in the 19th century, in the 18th century, literally it means that we are not making progress anyway. So it means that even the next generation as well, they probably come and make the same mistakes we're making, and no progress can actually be discovered in that particular area. So it's about, first of all, Dr. Nondomiso, asking ourselves that the question that, do we want to change the world? Yes, we want to change the world. Who do we want to change the world with? We then go back and start learning from those that have actually gone before us. And the reason why young people sometimes miss opportunities is because they feel that they have to compete with those who have been there before. They feel that they have to dominate. It's not, you don't change the world by dominating, you change the world by learning from someone who has actually done something before. And it's very important for us as young people to realize that as well. And it's the biggest challenge we actually face even in mentorship. Here's this young person is given someone to be mentored by, is given a mentor. As opposed to learning from the mentor, he feels, or he or she feels, that they have to be teaching the mentor certain things. Well and good. There are probably some things that you may have to teach your mentor, but then you really need to humble yourself and be that person that is also very much willing to listen and learn from your mentor. I always encourage young people to be like a sponge. At this stage where we are, we must be able to absorb every information, every knowledge that we're actually given, especially by those that we really trust and believe that these have actually walked this path diligently and they've actually succeeded in a particular area. And so we begin learning from there. And I think if we begin learning from there, then we've got a better chance of actually changing the world. So as opposed to being rebellious, as opposed to being like we're opposing, it's very important for us to really have the mindset of collaboration, have the mindset of a sponge, being able to absorb the knowledge, and of course, being humble enough, because humility itself is one of those things that can catapult us to the next level. Without humility, it will be very difficult for us to learn, because then we'll be rendered unteachable by the other generation. So it's very important for us to just follow some of those nuggets.
I think I couldn't have put it better.
Yeah,
Humility is always important in both directions, of course. As you
yeah,
say, it's a mutual relationship between generations that would really,
yeah,
that's the environment where the learning
mhm,
can happen
yeah,
best. Now, you're very busy traveling, but you also wear many hats.
yeah,
You're also involved in tobacco control as an advocate for
yeah,
that. You do some telemedicine, you have clinical work, you're involved in
yeah,
media, and of course the leadership work that you do in the organizations that you
yeah.
have started. How do you manage your time, the so-called work-life balance or work-life
Balance.
alignment? What does that look like for you? And of course, you are a family man too.
Yeah. So it's okay. The work-life balance, I think, is one that I know can be quite challenging for most of us, especially who've got so many things to juggle with. But the most important thing, firstly, as I always say, for a start, it's very important to discover that one thing that you're actually willing to die for. So Nelson Mandela actually once said, this is probably one of my favorite quotes by Nelson Mandela. He actually said that freedom is an ideal I'm prepared to live for. But if needs be, freedom is an ideal I'm prepared to die for. So he realized very early on that if you, first of all, must be able to make a difference, if you must be able to as well set priorities and maintain that work-life balance, very early on, you must discover what is that one thing that you're willing to die for. Then it's going to help you align your goals. Because then when you discover that particular thing, you then be able to set your priorities in a way that you're able to handle these varying priorities. And of course, time is going to come when you also be required to say no to certain opportunities. And I always tell young people that you need to develop the power of saying no, because certain opportunities will definitely not align with where you want to go, for example. It's very important for you to know which ones to prioritize and be able to set priorities. So setting priorities itself is extremely important, and I think it's one thing that I've managed to really do in my life. For example, I have set priorities. I know that my core issues, for example, are health and leadership. And so I really get to channel my life and my advocacy into these particular areas. And of course, being passionate about NCDs as well, I now advocate for tobacco control, because tobacco itself and smoking is really the biggest risk factor to developing some of these non-communicable diseases. And so I've really streamlined my work to ensuring that I'm advocating against the use of tobacco, and as well as, of course, public health awareness by virtue of course being a doctor and being passionate about preventive medicine, as well as the aspect of health equity, ensuring that people have got the right information when it comes to varying health issues. And at the same time, it's also very important to deliberately set time for the other priorities that you have in your life. For example, I recently got married, so it means that now I also have a wife that will need my time definitely, and I'll be doing an injustice to her and myself if I spend all my time doing all these particular things and fail in one particular area, because I also believe that what is not done well is not done at all. So it means that if you fail in one particular area, you might probably not do well as well in the other areas. So you always need that extra bit of motivation from family. And so because they are giving you the encouragement, they're praying for you, you also must find time deliberately to sit down with them and hear from them, and they also probably have something to say about your life and something to say about what they have observed and where they think that you're failing, what they think that you actually do better. So I also do get to find time for that. But the key for me really is you need to be able to set your priorities right. You need to be able to really understand yourself, be self-aware, be able to understand your strengths, be able to understand your weaknesses. Many times we like talking about our strengths, but very few of us really pinpoint to ask ourselves to say, what are some of my weaknesses? And I began understanding some of that, and I understand my weakness. And my weakness really sometimes that I feel sometimes to stick to deadlines. I really get mixed up with time. And so having understood those weaknesses, I'm starting to make sure that these days, every time I've got a meeting, I put it on my calendar and all those kind of things. I ensure that I start doing work earlier to avoid missing on the deadlines. So I begin putting in these particular things even as I'm moving forward. Because at the end of the day, if you fail in one area, you probably fail in the other area. So it's very important that we set these priorities, ensure that we streamline our lives to see what is a priority at that particular moment. And I always like telling young people that avoid being everywhere. Sometimes you want to be everywhere. You want to be in climate change. You want to be in mental health. You want to be everywhere. That ultimately might end up exhausting you. And you might realize that you might not make any impact whatsoever in all those other areas. But sometimes, as you grow, as you discover what you're passionate about, it's also important that you streamline your work and then begin focusing in one particular area. As they say, if you beat a drum in one particular sport, to definitely break, right? So it means that when you discover that one particular thing that you're passionate about, if it's mentorship, if it's leadership, you go outrightly for it. Whatever happens, the doors are definitely going to open for you in that particular area.
Very well put, and I like your emphasis on essentially the metaphor of not pouring from an empty cup. Speaking about supporting other people, which I know is what you do through you. If you were to cast an eye forward, let's say 30, 40 years from now, when you look back, how will we describe your legacy?
Wow, that's that's a very interesting question. Yeah, so I would love my legacy to be described as one. First of all, I believe that I love your podcast and what you do as well. I think last time we did discuss about the Ubuntu coaching, right? So Ubuntu itself, I think, is coming from the aspect of humanity. I think for me, any legacy that's to be attached to me should really be one that should first of all have focused on humanity. I want people to say, okay, Blessings really had a passion for humanity. He really had a passion for helping people, and he really had a passion for serving. And because I'm passionate about leadership as well, I would love my legacy to be attached to raising leaders for our current generation and for generations to come. Because I believe that I'm sowing a seed in everything that I'm doing, in the young people I'm investing in. And I believe that 30, 40 years from now, I want them to be able to talk about me and say, there was this man who walked this earth, and this is what he actually did. And I love to look back during my university days. So I think when I formed the Debate Society, that must have been probably, I think I was in my fourth year of medical school. So when I founded the Debate Society, and I wanted to train young doctors, particularly in leadership and in public speaking. So now I think about 6, 7 years later, since I formed it, I actually received a call recently to say, okay, you know what, that society, like we're still training public speakers, and there are people that have heard about you to say you founded this particular club and they know about you and they've been following you and they've never met you before, but just by virtue of them hearing that you founded this particular society, your name is still echoing. Still in medical school, people are still talking about this particular initiative that you actually began. So everything that we're doing is about planting a seed. And the same also goes with you, Dr. Nondumi. So I know that sometimes you probably do have times where you get to feel that you can't do it anymore. You get to feel that maybe it gets tiresome. But everything that we're actually doing is planting a seed. And this seed will germinate and ultimately will then begin to get the rewards. And our names will be talked about for years and years to come to say there was this particular person who did this particular thing, impacted this number of lives. And I always like to tell young people as well that leadership itself is not about the numbers, but it's about the influence, it's about impact. If you can impact two people extensively, you impact them to the best of your ability, these two people in the next 40 years are going to talk about you and say, there was this person who impacted my life differently. And because of them, I'm also going to change the lives of other people. And like that, your message is passed on to future generations even long after a death. So I want to be remembered for humanity. I want to be remembered for raising leaders as well as changing generations and just impacting the world in a whole different way altogether.
Well, it's difficult to believe at times listening to you that you
Yeah.
only left medical school, what, 4 years ago now? You speak and accomplished so much in a short period of
Yeah.
time, which I think as the medical community, we are really blessed to have a focused colleague in the
Yeah.
profession. So, as we close, I wonder if you have any words to close us off with, perhaps some words of advice for particularly early career doctors, because I know that there you really have a lot of fire and energy for them
Yeah.
to wrap up our
Yeah.
session.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. I think it's been a very interesting conversation. And I really just want to say that one thing that we really need to take away is the fact that we need to, all of us, be able to discover that one thing and then also just be able to pursue something, right? Because at the end of the day, if we are to leave behind a legacy that will be remembered for years to come, we must begin from somewhere and we must begin now. So they say the best time to start was yesterday. The next best time to start is now, right? So it means that we have the opportunity to all of us begin something because all of us have got something that's deposited within us. And then we must all of us begin from somewhere and we must all of us begin from there. So personally, for me, it's been a great interaction. And of course, I'm always open to more interactions. I think I'm very much available on LinkedIn as Blessings Kasenge, and I'm sure we'll then be able to share this broadcast broadly, and then people will then be able to as well just keep engaged. But the most important thing to take away from this particular conversation, Dr. Nundumiso, as well, in closing, is that it's very important for all of us to also collaborate, very important for all of us to keep coming together. And when you sent me that message that you wanted me on your show, on your podcast, like you are in the US, I think I'm here now in Dublin. Probably I'll be going back to Zambia soon. But like it just speaks to the power of collaboration, the power of networking, and all of us have got enough potential to start something, and all of us have got enough time as well to collaborate with all of us because we can create much more impact. I know you're coming from South Africa as well, and the people that are following you from South Africa, people following you from Zambia, if we then come together, that is the only way that we can actually change the world. And particularly some of us as well who are in Africa, it's a chance as well for us to come together and see how best we can really find solutions for ourselves, amongst ourselves, because I believe solutions are there amongst ourselves. Only that we're not spending enough time to talk about these particular problems. But if we spend more time talking about these particular problems, we'll then be able to discover and find a solution to some of these particular problems. I always say that the solutions are always within us. It probably there's a young doctor who wants a job, but probably maybe Dr. Ndumiso knows someone who needs a doctor, right? And as long as we don't interact, it'll be very difficult for us to know where the opportunities actually are. So we need to keep collaborating in this particular way. We need to keep having conversations. We need to keep interacting. We need to keep talking. That is the only way that we can actually be able to make that particular difference. As Martin Luther King says, our lives begin to end when we remain silent about things that matter. So please, let's not remain silent. Let's keep talking. Let's keep interacting.
I think a wonderful place to end our conversation and very inspiring indeed. Networking and the power of networking is one of the
Yeah,
resources that we have to support each other and to
yeah.
grow not only as individuals but as a medical community. Dr. Blessings Kasenge, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Miso. The pleasure was all mine.
And that brings us to the end of another show. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have found this talk to be inspirational, please ensure that you follow us, like on our social media platforms, and also share amongst your networks and your colleagues. Doctors of the Baobab, where medicine meets innovation. Thank you.